It sold out earlier today, but they released some more tickets. I think it's still available on Eventbrite, but there will be some tickets at the door as well for that, because a lot of this is not just about psychedelics, but creating social connections. So something that I thought I'd keep you in the know about. There's a poster on the way out as well. There we go. Dimming lights, such a good idea. The next panel is about the changing landscape of the psychedelic movement. Let me look up the actual. Oh my gosh, I almost nailed that from memory. It's the changing landscape of psychedelics, and the moderator is actually, I think this is kind of a nice transition from the last question that we heard, which was about kind of dosing guidelines, to like understanding how do we I've always liked the term with psychedelics, non-specific amplifiers, and that psychedelics will often amplify what is inside of you in kind of sometimes unexpected ways that we don't necessarily have a lot of control over. And anyone in here who has had a psychedelic experience knows that they can be a bit unpredictable. So how do you go about kind of setting guidelines and things like that? The moderator, Doris Lee, actually has a company here in town that is launching very soon called Entheos, that is trying to pave the way in setting aside some of those guidelines. Listen, guys, I did my first psychedelic comedy show. I was a regular stand-up comedian, then I did science-themed shows, and through weird happenstance in podcasting, and happened to mention psychedelics on podcasts, and people, to my surprise, were interested, and I was like, oh, throw together a show. And then to more my surprise, people actually showed up and to hear about psychedelics. And I can tell you that my first couple of psychedelic-themed shows, and I've been telling psychedelic jokes for 20 years now. I'd sprinkle them in show. It was how much things have changed. I remember in 2007 having to fight the FCC to get the most benign joke about mushrooms on Conan O'Brien. It was like the silliest thing in the world, and it's changed. So 10 years ago, when I was introduced to I smoked DMT for the first time, dimethyltryptamine, the active ingredient in ayahuasca. Like, no one knew what ayahuasca was. Now everyone knows what ayahuasca is. You know, people are, it's a whole cliche. Everyone's flying to Peru or Brooklyn, and you sit with a shaman or someone who says they're a shaman, and they give you this cup of tea, and you drink this thing, and you get to puke and shit all over your friends, and then at the end of it, you realize that you have to give up your steady job to focus on pottery, and so everyone's kind of. I mean, now it's being mentioned on ESPN and what it's just insane. And so I have, please follow me, ShaneMoss.com. Join my mailing list. I'm in about 3 cities a week, touring around with an immersive psychedelic show with a live VJ providing visuals and stuff for it. So I did a couple shows last night, and I can tell you from doing that there's I get so many questions after shows like, where do I go about getting ayahuasca? What's the best? And I couldn't even tell you myself. There's like if you just Google like, I want to do an ayahuasca ceremony in Peru, it's whoever has the fanciest website and has dialed in their SEO, which might just be a very, very manic tech bro that did ayahuasca for the first time a month ago. And so how do you know? How do people that genuinely need and could benefit from not just help, but just forget needing help, but just improving your life generally, like what kind of regulatory, what kind of guidelines. One of the panelists tonight is the founder of the Chacuna Institute, who that's the #1 place that I like, look up the Chacuna Institute. I've had their brochures at my tables and stuff after shows for 7 years now, and because they're a really trusted organization. But the whole problem is, how do you, if someone's just Googling a thing, how do you know? And how do you protect people from the many kind of charlatans out there, and then also just how do you create the best opportunities for people? So it's a really challenging subject. So the moderator of this panel today is kind of doing sort of a nonprofit kind of lawyery with a heart, like trying to have kind of a bar for psychedelics, and kind of trying to help create some policies before politicians get in and muck up everything else. So creating guidelines that us as a psychedelic community can have conversations about and agree upon. For not everyone needs to follow those exact guidelines, but here's some kind of best practices, and what does that look like? It's such a, again, like I said, I've been doing psychedelics for 27 years, and that's an endlessly complicated question for me. As someone that gets a zillion questions from people every day, it's overwhelming. It's just such a complex subject, and so I'm just absolutely fascinated by the changing landscape in psychedelics. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this panel. Please welcome your moderator, Doris Lee, everybody.
Where do you want to sit? Yeah. Oh. I guess.
Thank you, Shane, so much. I just want to let everybody know I'm geeking out that Shane Moss just introduced me for this panel. I'm a huge fan of his comedy. And if you know, and I think a lot of us here know, you know. But if you don't, you need to check out his comedy. It's hilariously funny. It's like you're going to split your gut. But also, it's really educational. It's kind of a crazy mix. So thank you again, Shane, for all the laughs tonight. I am Doris Lee. I am the CEO and co-founder of Entheos. We are a nonprofit trade association for people working in the psychedelic and indigenous plant medicine space. Entheos will work as a group to create an organization that promotes accountability, advocacy, and safe access in this growing industry. There's a lot of gray area right now in this space, but when it comes to ensuring safety and harm reduction, we need to be very clear in our intentions and our actions. They have to line up. The initial impetus for Entheos and the focus for our immediate attention is the local need for the Utah legislature to have better information with dealing with plant medicine so they can make better informed decisions. We are launching soon, and we are launching soon, and we would love to have your contact so we can share more about what we're doing as we ramp up. So please visit my little table out in the exhibition hall and sign up to get more details. Or a timeshare, we don't know. But enough about me, and I'm so honored to be sitting up here with these three amazing, diverse women. They've come to this space from such different backgrounds, and they bring so much important heart and detail into this work that they're doing. So again, let's dive into the changing landscape of psychedelics. First, it's my incredible pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelist, Dr. Bia Labate. Dr. Labate is a visionary thinker, anthropologist, and author who has dedicated her entire career to the study of psychedelics and indigenous plant medicines. As the founder of the Chacuna Institute, which Shane just mentioned, for psychedelic plant medicines, Dr. Labate has been at the forefront of promoting the understanding, appreciation, and responsible use of these medicines. Her extensive research and contributions to the field have significantly enriched our knowledge of the cultural, spiritual, and therapeutic dimensions of psychedelics. With a wealth of academic expertise, Dr. Labate brings a unique perspective to our discussion today. Her commitment to fostering informed and compassionate dialogue around psychedelic experiences is nothing short of remarkable. So please join me in welcoming the brilliant Dr. Labate to the forum today. Is there anything, Dr. Labate, you'd like to share about the work that you're doing?
I want to thank everybody, thank the organizers for the opportunity. I am Brazilian, and it's a great honor to be here. We don't have snow, and I'm still in awe when I see it. And I also think this word Utah is extremely cool, and I just feel it's great, opportunity to come to a new place and share our knowledge and be with kindred people and explore together. Thank you so much. I'm kind of passionate about it, as she said, dedicated since 33 years since I ate mushrooms when I was in my late 19 or 20, and since then been drinking ayahuasca for 27 years and published 28 books and have a lot of different roles and hats, sit in many boards and have my own nonprofit, also work part-time for MAPS, and so I'm happy to be here, and thank you.
We're so happy to have you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to introduce our next amazing panelist, the dynamic and tireless Susie Baker, the co-founder of the Psychedelic Assembly, and founding the first brick-and-mortar psychedelic library, social club, and event space located in the heart of New York City. Susie curates social connection and platforms an impressive array of voices within the psychedelic space, and I think that's so important that we have platforms like Susie provides. She's the co-founder of My Purple Lady, a new company developing plant-based mood-enhancing products. They're here today. Go check out their booth. She's also the head of community engagement for the Psychedelic Comedy Tour, A Better Trip, through which she is expanding the Psychedelic Assembly with regional events, including the after party tonight, everybody, where you can meet the others at the Odd Star Studios. I hope to see you guys there. As a founding member of the Psychedelic Assembly, Susie is dedicated to providing spaces that encourage open conversations, destigmatizes psychedelic experiences, thank you, and promotes harm reduction. Her commitment to building a supportive and informed community aligns seamlessly with our mission today. So let's extend a warm welcome to Susie Baker. We're so honored to have her here with us. Susie, is there anything you'd like to share about the work that you're doing before we jump in?
Yeah. First of all, I'm absolutely honored to be here, especially on this panel with these two lovely women. At the Psychedelic Assembly, we are brand new. We opened last year, and we really believe in providing space for people who are using psychedelics in their lives to connect and find the others. And we believe in education as harm reduction. So we are sponsored by Synergetic Press and Inner Traditions and carry all of their titles. So our members have access to this literature. We carry a lot of yearbooks, Dr. Bia. And, we really believe that if people have community and have education and have a place to listen to the voices of people who hopefully we're integrating these original practices and tools into the psychedelic landscape, that could be helpful, hopefully. So if you're ever in New York, it's the best place in the city, in my opinion, and we're hoping to expand and have psychedelic assemblies everywhere. So
thank you. Let's all take a road trip. And finally, I'd really like to introduce our next distinguished panelist, Dr. Ariel Richer. Dr. Richer is a dedicated activist and researcher who brings her work in developing culturally tailored interventions with systemically marginalized communities into the field of psychedelics and indigenous plant medicines. As a respected member of this community, Dr. Richer has contributed to the exploration of psychedelic-assisted therapies from the client and community perspective. Her expertise in the intersection of social work and entheogens is bringing forth valuable insights that will shape the future of mental health treatment. Dr. Richer's commitment to evidence-based practices and compassionate care exemplifies the responsible integration of psychedelics and indigenous plant medicines into therapeutic settings. Her contributions extend well beyond the laboratory as she actively engages in public discourse, striving to bridge the gap between scientific research and societal understanding. It's an honor to have you here, Ariel Richer. Join us today, and so we're really looking forward to all the knowledge that you bring.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you'd like to add about your work before we jump in?
Absolutely. Thanks, you all, for being here. And first, I do want to acknowledge the land that we're on. We're on the land of the Ute, the Paiute, the Goshoot, the Shoshone and Navajo nations right now. I'd be remiss not to speak about the land that we're on. Myself, I am Afro-Indigenous and white. I come from the Carib Indians of Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, and my white side is from Canada. I'm also the co-founder and co-director of Urban Indigenous Collective. We are an Indigenous-led mental health nonprofit in New York City, and we focus on bringing culturally tailored interventions to urban living Indigenous folks.
Amazing, thank you. So let's get started with our questions. How would you describe the current landscape of psychedelic research, therapy, and public perception today? Bia, can I throw it to you first? It's a big question. You can pick any one of those topics to dive into.
In terms of the research, I think it's much better than it was before because you're seeing some big government institutions giving the first grants to psychedelic research, like NIDA. I was 2 days ago talking to SAMHSA, that is a public health branch of the federal government. So I feel there is more openness in ways that didn't exist before, because before all the funding would go to show negative aspects. People were trying to investigate harms because they didn't consider that psychedelics had potential benefits. And of course, there's this kind of crazy circularity that they are classified as Schedule 1, which is supposed to have, to be addictive and non-medical use. But then if you want to study the healing potentials, you're already starting with a block because there's all this kinds of red tape. So I feel there is a lot of progress in terms of the research happening. Still much more biomedical than social sciences, which I personally, as an anthropologist, I'm a little biased, but I think it's a great reductionism and would love to see more humanities. In terms of therapy, there's a big discussion today on psychedelic-assisted therapy, because everybody talks about therapy, but there's not a lot of reflection on what kind of therapy should we be doing, so that's a big area. And then there's this imbalance between the traditions on the underground that had ways to do things, also that have a kind of continuity with shamanism and indigenous people, and ways of carrying relationships and rituals and intentions that migrate to the sort of underground therapeutic circles, and that informs the above ground. But there's a lot of lack of clarity about rules and ethics. Things of one context don't translate immediately for the other one. For example, it would be normal in the underground to take somebody in their home and, do psychedelics and that person work in the garden or something. But then if you look at modern, ethical standards, it doesn't translate at all. So there's a lot of ethical issues that are on the making, issues around consent, for example, and touch, things like some people think it's important to touch, and other people think it's a total taboo. So there's a lot of cool discussion. And then the other one, research therapy and...
It was research, therapy, and public perception.
Public perception, I'm going to just say one line. People still don't get it. And, sorry for the innocent. Some of us are more visionary and ahead of time, and we get it. But, yeah, it's there's much work to do still, I guess. I'll pass it to my colleagues.
Yeah, I could speak to the public perception of it just because it's really interesting being located on 46th Street between 2nd and 3rd. So we're between Grand Central and the UN, and we're a publicly facing psychedelic brick and mortar, space. And so people will stumble in diplomats from the UN or just people passing, people working in the area, and we've never gotten any negative feedback from just walk-ins. People are very curious. And also I was talking to my co-founder, Kat Lakey, about it, about this topic, and both of us kind of racked our brain, and we're we've only had positive questions. No one's been scared or alarmed, which is kind of surprising with the pub. It is New York City, but also I have to speak to the fact that there's 1,500 of us in Utah. I was raised Mormon. I went on a Mormon mission, and the thought of, speaking about psychedelics in front of 1,500 other, probably ex-Mormons, most of y'all, is awesome, So, like, things are changing, I think.
Can we ask how many ex-Mormons are there? Can we ask how many ex-Mormons?
Yeah, we have a question for y'all. How many ex-Mormons are in the crowd? Yeah! Wow! Yeah.
Very nice to have everybody here. Ariel, what do you think about that question in terms of the current landscape?
I've been doing a lot of thinking about this recently, and I want to be very open. So I'm a social worker. I'm also an assistant professor at the U, and I'm coming into this field actually only within the past year. Well, I guess we're in 2024 now, but within the past 12 months. So first, thank you for welcoming me so warmly into a newer field for me. And as I've been kind of getting situated and understanding kind of the state of research and kind of where therapy is going now, we're still seeing it's pretty white. And I'm coming from an Indigenous and Black perspective. We know that the majority of people who are in clinical trials are white. So I think that's definitely an area that we should grow in. And it's going to be like my same answer every time we go through most of these things. So I'm going to say it's an area of growth right now.
But do you think it's typically white male or white female? Are we seeing any diversity within that subset even? Like, are we talking about, is it queer? Do we know information like that yet?
I think there is some information on it,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking right now about like clinical trials.
Okay.
And then now I'm also thinking about there's a lot of social work and counselor training programs popping up, and in nursing schools very quickly and very fast. And I'm thinking, whoa, hold on, we're training all these folks to work with who? We haven't spoken with communities. We haven't spoken with those who are marginalized. I've typically worked with people who have been involved in the criminal legal system, who are queer, who are trans, who are on probation or parole. Like, what is it going to look like for them to get access to this? And how is it affecting them? We know that Black and brown people and people who've been marginalized are experiencing a disproportionate amount of mental health diagnoses and negative mental health experiences. So if psychedelics are being touted as this cure and something to assist, they need to be involved in the research from the very beginning and understanding their perceptions.
Oh, that's an amazing insight. Thank you. Thank you. So as this landscape is changing and definitely growing, as evidenced by this room tonight, what do you think are some of the major challenges associated with the increasing interest in psychedelics? Susie, can I ask you first? Because I feel like you have a real man-on-the-street perspective on that.
The challenge, I would kind of echo what Ariel said. Like, I think the challenges are, we know at this point these are non-specific amplifiers. So if we're just using these things to just elevate, whatever's going on in here or whatever's going on out here, which is flawed, what's the point, kind of. So, I think there's a lot of challenges.
So do you think it's mainly around education and making sure we're educating the people who are curious or have gained access to these medicines?
Yeah, education I think is very important. I think, making sure we remember where these things come from, and we give honor and respect to the practices that have been happening for a lot longer than just these past 100 years that psychedelics have been hot. So, and then elevating, and platforming the voices of the people who have that knowledge. So I think just, doing our best to, that's what at the Psychedelic Assembly, it's like we have space, and that's our thing is, elevating the voices of the marginalized and the fringe. The psychedelic space is a fringe thing, but oftentimes, like within it, marginalized groups it's still fringe. So it's like remembering that
Yeah.
and making sure that that is what's being elevated and yeah.
Great. Ariel, do you want to touch upon that too?
Yesterday, Doris and I had this wonderful conversation about lifting up voices,
Yeah.
and I said, as you're lifting up voices, that means the dominant voices also have to quiet themselves. They have to be very introspective, to just kind of sit back and be quiet, because there are a lot of other voices there.
Yeah, that really shook me when you said that, because I'm a loud voice, and I also recognize that when we're holding space, sometimes it's so easy to want to just join that space with others, right? Because it does feel like so much community, but it's so important to let them have that arena for themselves as well. So thanks again for that, Dr. Lapata.
Well, I just want to take a minute to celebrate this crowd of ex-Mormons here and speak to, the problem of patriarchy. And I just want to drop in there that I'm married to Clancy, and I'm proud to be married to her. And I think that, like her, I think patriarchy is one of the main challenges. And in Chacruna, we have a big branch of our work is devoted to queer issues. And so to just understanding and accepting that there's a plurality of ways of being together in this world, in this big adventure, in this joint canoe going I don't know where, is that there's many different types of people. And I agree with them, diversity is a big thing. I also agree with Clancy that the commodification is a real problem. Opportunistic people that, have self-interest or money as ahead of healing or ego, and that are not understanding that we're here to serve, and that the medicine just teaches us that we have to give back and to serve and to honor the people that found these medicines and the lands and the territories they come from. And of course, as an anthropologist and also as a recent immigrant to the United States, I'm, just very shocked with the vulgarization, the banalization, that happens around sacred plants. And I feel there's a lot of, rush about mainstreaming, but sometimes it's scary mainstreaming because it's a magnet to aspects of the culture that are not so sexy to me. And so I feel, pains in my heart as somebody that's been researching and publishing and drinking ayahuasca for a lifetime, and the way that it's been vulgarized and, made to some kind of quick fix or something, I think is a big problem. And then, of course, there's the problem of the fake promises, the panacea, the solution of everything. I do also want to mention that there is a terrible war going on, and I want to say that it pains my heart, and I want to stand in solidarity with what's happening now. And I don't believe that giving psychedelics is going to be the end of this war or are going to heal all problems of humanity, and it's the ultimate tool to cure all trauma and all problems, and that's called psychedelic washing. We have to work on the structures of oppression and the inequalities and the class problems and the problem of this tendency of ethnocentrism, dominance over others, which happens across countries. Some countries have more power than others. And so I think we have to be also more political. And so therefore, I consider a challenge the apolitical stance of the psychedelic movement that is not like raising issues like this one. So that's a problem for me, too.
Yeah, it's a big one. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, we touched upon this a little bit earlier, but how can our community, our psychedelic and indigenous plant community, ensure diversity and inclusion in the research that we're doing, in the therapy that we're sharing with each other, and importantly, advocacy for each other? Does anyone want to take that first?
I guess that's me.
That's you then, Ariel.
I've been voluntold. Something that we're doing, something that I see less of, I've been seeing some surveying of potential practitioners coming up, but a venture that myself and Urban Indigenous Collective will be embarking on is to learn and understand the perceptions and the readiness to integrate plant medicines and psychedelics into their lives among Indigenous people in the Northeast. So I'm very excited. Hopefully that'll be happening sometime over the next year. But that's not the most important part for me. The most important part for me is that it's community-based, that we'll be working with a community that I've been part of for a while and be able to develop like materials and dispel myths and talk about kind of like bring back an understanding that these indigenous plant medicines have always been part of our practices, that it was by no mistake that that many people don't have this knowledge right now of, I'm speaking specifically of indigenous folks. There were specific settler colonial policies put in place. So it's not an accident that we didn't just forget or not want to be able to use these medicines. It was structural violence. So, sorry, I was going mini rants.
I like it. I want more. I definitely want more of that.
But that brings me back to, again, starting off from the very beginning, as you're like forming your questions. Again, from a research perspective, I'm not a clinical social worker, but from when I think, I'm like, ooh, this is an interesting idea. I'm like, better take it to the community and see what they're thinking. Is this the direction that we even want to go? So we thought we were just going to jump in and be like, oh yeah, we're ready to start potentially ramping up to offer this. I'm like, we need to step back and see if like people are ready. And if they're not ready right now, we're not going to move forward. I loved what they said on the last panel, that it's not for, like, you don't have to force it to people. You don't have to evangelize it. It's just people will come to you and, have it be much more natural.
That's lovely. Thank you. Susie, I wanted to touch upon this too, because when you and I were speaking earlier, I really was inspired by the fact that you are a platform. And so, being able to have a platform where someone from Iran can talk about their psychedelic experiences as it relates to themselves and their culture, and you hold this space for the queer community who are interested in psychedelics, for BIPOC community as well. And so I'm just curious, is just having that platform, how has that been for you in terms of like developing the Psychedelic Assembly and furthering your mission and making it a more diverse space?
Yeah, I think we've had some really, really great perspectives in the space to learn from that that we're really inspired by. I'll speak to one kind of series that we did at the beginning of last year. We hosted a BIPOC Voices in Psychedelics, and basically it was hosted by our good friend Pammy Jackson, who runs the Psychedelic Sisterhood, and basically the space was just open. We just gave the space once a month for her and her community to have discussions, and they invited anyone in that wanted to come in. But it was really interesting because it was BIPOC community having kind of storytelling amongst each other, and then there were some white folks who were in the community that were just there to listen, and it was really uncomfortable. Like, it was really, really uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of white folks. But it was to sit there and just like, that's not the norm for white people to not say anything, So I think if you have resources, if you have spaces, if you have a way that you can elevate those voices, do it and listen to them, it's, I don't know, just listening and closing it.
Back to what Ariel said earlier, right? Like, when we want to lift other people's voices, we might have to lower ours.
Right.
So that's wonderful. Thank you.
I actually made a list.
Oh.
Okay. Create projects that are in partnership, in collaboration. So you want to help other people, ask them to be part of your team and collaborate, create this together. I just published an article. It's just one page, but it's pretty cool, in Nature Mental Health. It was an indigenous medical doctor, a neuroscientist, and myself. So we got into a dialogue. We co-created it. Create in collaboration, in partnership. And then if you're like creating a diversity committee in your research project or in your organization, in your conference, give them money and resources, and then give them decision-making power. It's not just to consult them, but they have to have the right to have a saying, or else it's called washing or tokenization. You need to put the people that are talking about these issues with real ability to influence outcomes. And then always try to collect data about diversity in your institution or conferences. So always try to know who are the people that are coming. And of course, what they spoke a lot, platform and give visibility to BIPOC speakers, and empower BIPOC authors and speakers to have more resources. So we think often, how can I help white people understand racism? How can I help white people this or that? But are we saying, how can I help black therapists to feel more empowered? There's just like 2 or 3% of therapists or psychiatrists that are black in the United States. So creating resources in partnership for these other communities is really important. That's what when we in Chacruna, we had the Racial Equity and Access Committee, and always what they were telling us, like, we are tired to go speak to people. We want things for ourselves, and we want more resources. So what you can do to help us is help us give resources and money and support, and then be accountable to those communities and not to your white peers. I want to say, I feel much more honored when an indigenous person or a black American comes to me and thank me for my work than a medical scientist from Harvard or Yale, because that's much harder to get. That's really hard to get, and that's years. And Ariel spoke to this, create research that is community-based. Ask the community, what are you interested in? What do you need? How can I put my power and my privilege at service of you? What is it that you need? How can I collaborate? And then when you do your research, also go back and share the results of that research. Help rewrite the mainstream narratives that the psychedelic field tells itself. This is not something that, was flourishing in the 60s, and then the counterculture messed it up, and now we're getting all this power again. Like, that's a very minimal window to the story of the psychedelic movement. The story of the psychedelic movement needs to be rewritten. There is no renaissance. This always exists. There's a renaissance in a little tiny piece of the world and tiny piece of time. And what is more difficult for me, that after all is older, 52, try to quote different references and bibliography, because when we are writers and researchers, we always quote those people that we were taught in university, and we don't quote other sources. So trying to diversify other sources is really important. And I want to say that I'm really thankful and God bless for the Gen Zs and the millennials that are getting it and are already ahead of us. So I say listen to the young people as well, because their levels of tolerance for racism and heteronormativity and oppression are smaller. And so us as older people, it's good to have like a kind of shadow person that you can run your ideas through, because it's changing and we need to catch up.
Damn, lady. Thank you. Thank you, that was really powerful. So, as we're wrapping up the questions that I have, and everybody, we're going to open up to the floor for the Q&A. We're here now, right? And I already feel like there's so much change happening, and that's so. Again, I'm so pleased that we're a stage full of women, right? That's incredible. But and again, where do we see ourselves going in this community, in the psychedelic and indigenous plant space, in the next 5 to 10 years? And is it looking hopeful? Is it looking good to you guys? Like, how are you feeling about that change in the coming years? You're making a funny face, Ariel, so I'm going to go with you first.
Oh man, I do this to my students, and now I'm going to not do that. I was like, oh, it looks inquisitive. Today, I'm feeling hopeful. I think we are. If we listen to this list that Via presented and start listening to these voices, I think it can move in a wonderful direction. But it does run the risk of over-professionalization, making something an individual fix out of systemic issues. I think those are two things I didn't bring up earlier, but I think kind of echoes what Bia was saying. But today, in this space, I'm feeling hopeful that if we keep having more conferences and convenings and gatherings and focusing on the communal aspect, I think it can move in a good direction.
I think so too. Thank you. And I love the community piece about it as well, because I think we talked about like it's an individual fix, it's a quick fix. And we often forget that, like, you know, we're a vast network of connected people, and you know that connection only serves us better and better the further we spend the time connecting with more people. So what about you, Susie? What are you thinking about the future?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I mean, yeah, kind of today especially, and very happy to be here and hopeful. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think these things have huge potential. You know, like I feel I can only speak from my own experience, and it's like I really feel like psychedelics were the only thing that kind of broke my brain in a way that it needed to break to leave the Mormon paradigm. So it's like, I mean, that was a really strong system on my brain. So like, I think it has potential to do that for people if they're interested. Again, it's just like, I always come back to that like non-specific amplifier. Like it all just depends on what's going on with you. You know, it's just going to turn the volume up. So, I mean, be kind, be compassionate, I don't know, take care of yourself and others. And yeah, I think there's hope.
Right. And I think I was speaking to Pam earlier, and she said this is not just a, you know, take it and run situation. You know, we're creating an ecosystem. You know what I mean? And we really have to, you know, just like any flora and fauna, we have to take care of this ecosystem and keep feeding into it and making sure that we're mentoring, that we're sharing, we're connecting, and, you know, we're feeding positivity into it versus just sort of like making it this, you know, this thing for ourselves. So
yeah, I really appreciated something that Dr. Pamela said about just, you know, psychedelics aren't the only thing too. Like it's life too. Mm-hmm. So, you know, take some of these hopefully valuable visions and journeys and lessons that you get in these experiences and actually try to apply them in life. That shit is hard to do. It's a lot more fun and easier to blast off, but like life is the hard part, right. You know? So I think if we're being like vigilant and holding ourselves, and hopefully we're in communities that hold each other accountable in these best practices like you're doing, then yeah, I think there's hope.
Great.
I'm afraid I have another list, but
I love your list. No, I love your list.
So I hate this kind of question. Where do you see the future of psychedelics in the next 5 to 10 years? It kind of bugs me, but I took the challenge.
Well, I'm getting a list out of it, so I'm very happy.
Barry anthropologist. It depends of the country you're talking about. So I'm going to talk about the United States. I think the psychedelic-assisted therapies will be more established, but there will be huge financial gaps, all kinds of insurance problems. And then I think there's going to be a lot of more religious communities spreading all over the United States. There's going to be a lot of other decriminalization, grassroots movements spreading across the country. We're going to have more states implementing initiatives like Oregon and Colorado. I think we're also going to have more secular and recreational or social uses, or however you want to name that. As I said, I hope that we have less research obstacles, more money, more institutional support, more funding, more grants. And I think we're going to also have all kinds of different, like local and self-help communities, things like the psychedelic societies that already exist. And I also think we're going to see a big takeover of big pharma and more corporate initiatives. More startups, and maybe a lot of them are going to die and not going to survive. There's a lot of them that open and close already all the time. That's I feel happy when I'm a grassroots nonprofit when I see that. And then these psychedelics are going to be related to all kinds of professions, like nurses or musicians. This is the beauty of it. Every single profession can find a gift and a way to collaborate, a vocation, and then more like associations of, local associations of all kinds of professions. We're going to have more public acceptance of psychedelics, more normalization, both of the therapeutic and no therapeutic uses. We're also going to have more and more problematic players, like leaders that don't have any lineage and are doing a lot of cultural appropriation, or just weird uses. And I'm going to mention things like giving psychedelics for soldiers to enhance their performance to go to war, or just for personal beauty, things like that. I also think we're going to have a lot of new experts, that this is already happening, and a lot of the founders of this movement are being replaced by investors or big players. But I am also thinking we're going to have a lot of more indigenous leaders, and I've already seen this happening in the United States, and this is very interesting and cool. We're going to have a lot of combinations with VR and technologies and augmented reality, and things for psychedelics for life enhancement. What would I like to see? I added that to the question.
Thank you.
I would like to see the development of more and more tools for screening and drug testing and harm reduction. I would like to see more education. I'm also going to suggest for all of you to make a donation for the Chikrina Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines. I want to say that everybody talks about education, 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 but there is no money for education, and that's a huge challenge. I hope that we can redesign systems of care and models of mental health to better support people having psychedelic healing across our health systems. I hope that we will have less focus on therapy and neuroscience and more integrated uses to society at large. In sum, not only more opportunities to integrate psychedelics responsibly into society, we all want less harm and more, uses that are harmonic, but we also must just celebrate psychedelics for a lot of other things, like they are fun and they are good to think. They make you think about who you are, where you came from, where we're going, what it is to be together, how to love the other people, how to respect difference, how to understand this alterity, what is this invisible world, the world beyond, the world of the spirits and eternity, or whatever is there. Psychedelics are reflexive tools that are not just therapeutic. They are for a lot of things, and for also to write and enjoy culture. They're related to culture, music, roots, to tradition, people, land. And so I hope we have a lot of wonderful things ahead.
I just want to say I would read a book of your lists. So I love your list. Thank you. Those are the questions that I have. We'd love to open it up to the audience today for a Q&A. So there's a microphone here. If anyone would like to line up to ask these amazing women any questions, please feel free. I see some people lining up. Hi, please go ahead.
Hi. Oh, it's not on.
Mic check.
Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Amanda. I live here in Utah, and I just want to we were talking about the future of psychedelics. I'm a historian. I'd like to bring it back a little bit. We live in a Western society that has a tradition of taking from indigenous cultures. We saw here at the beginning of this panel where we acknowledged indigenous land. However, I'm wondering how we're actually giving back, how we're going beyond the lip service in psychedelics. Here at the Grand America, this ticket was price prohibitive to many, many people. So what are we doing to give back? Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent question, and I will fully admit I don't know the full answer to it. But I agree with you that there's socioeconomic hurdles to, just even getting the right kind of mental health therapy. And I do think that while maybe this ticket price might have been prohibitive for some people, this is a first step in having this conversation in a very conservative state, where, the majority of people outside of Salt Lake City probably aren't really in tune to what we're doing in terms of psychedelics, especially as it pertains to mental health and the good that it can do for so many people. So, I just want to acknowledge, I'm sorry, I don't know where you went, Amanda, but I think hey, they are. I think your statement is really fair, and, and I'll kick it back to the ladies, and just in terms of like what we can do to, promote more access in this kind of space.
Well, I already had my list for that, but I want to say that we have our Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative of the Americas, Chakruna. We support 17 groups with small grants. We get donations both from like people like us all and until like big investors and companies, and we divide between these groups. And I invite you all to visit the Chakruna table and pick up a flyer and get a sticker and learn more about that initiative.
For me personally, and in my experience in the space, like I said, we opened our doors a year ago in February. So, and we are not funded. We do not have investors. It's my co-founder and I who have never been paid. So, the way that we feel we can give back in this changing landscape is giving our space. So we have 1,000 square feet in Midtown Manhattan. It's relatively easy to access via like public transportation and everything. And yeah, we don't charge for rent for a lot of the events that happen in the space, and we are membership supported, and that also makes that possible, so that we can keep our doors open to host free events. And so I can only speak to my personal experience, and yeah, that's it.
I will say, as someone who is a co-founder of a newer nonprofit, we are Indigenous-led, very small, also wasn't paid for most of the years. Exactly what Susie's talking about, having people be able to offer space, offer time, offer resources, and Bia also spoke to that earlier. Again, I can only speak from our perspective, and actually our office is Midtown, but just on the west side, so we're not too far from Susie, so I'm excited to collaborate in the future. And just as we are moving forward, but I do think for the big players, the folks who do have the money, it is ceding that power, ceding that money to Indigenous groups, and listening when they say, hey, we actually don't want these medicines to be used by everybody. Don't use them. So I had to censor myself there.
Nice catch. We have a lot of people in line, so I just want to make sure that we can get through everybody. Would you like to go, please?
Hi. This is a lot of what Bia spoke to, but the more we're learning, I'm in school right now for this, the more we're learning that the closer psilocybin and some other psychedelics are getting to becoming illegal with the FDA, pharmaceutical companies, and the government. Are you worried that even though we are pushing community-based and we're pushing accessibility, is there any worry that this is going to become less accessible, and that I feel like the more people are learning about the potential for their mental health help and their, spiritual guidance, that it's becoming more expensive, it's becoming more inaccessible, and are you worried that the government, FDA, pharmaceutical companies, medical institutions are really going to try to squash down the Indigenous and the community-based programs?
No, not particularly. I don't think that this is happening. There's not so much opposition, like, for example, in Oregon, when this advanced. Back in the day, the more mainstream psychiatrists and researchers, they would completely refuse to have any conversation around policy, for example. And they thought that talking about drug reform was going to affect the results of the science, and they wanted to go through the science route and advance the science and not have conversations about policy. But what happened is that you had a grassroots spontaneous outburst of decriminalization movements across the country, and that changed a lot of the landscape. And when things like Oregon happened, you had not so much, like one psychiatrist wrote one letter saying something. There is some resistance, but the caravan is passing and the dogs are going to bark. I want to add one thing. about the question on what can you do to help, I remember Ann Harrison. Are you here, Annie?
Yeah, Annie's here.
Can you stand? I just wanted people to know her. She's a leader and has been influential. And she told me something that in a lecture that I liked back in the day, that was, if you want to help this movement, perhaps you can study business and learn how to make money, because we have a lot of anthropologists and psychologists and lovers of plants, but we also need people that are savvy in finances to help with money.
I just wanted to add something. Like in Oregon, some of the service centers, they're just starting to open up, but some of them are charging like $15,000 a treatment, and that's what I'm concerned about, is they're making it so inaccessible because of the bureaucracy and the red tape that they have to go through to even get started, and that's what I worry about.
Well, like Dr. Pamela said, I mean, you can find these things outside, so just go. Just kidding. Maybe using them at home more and talking to your friends a little bit more. I don't know. That's probably not a good answer, but
Thank you.
we don't have to go through them.
I guess it's on the same note, but when she was talking about it being inaccessible, my concern, I guess, is how do you preserve the beauty of the medicine? Big pharma is coming in, they're doing studies on what the effects of psilocybin on mental health and stuff. And when big companies come, right, they start to sort of pillage certain things and make it less beautiful. So I guess my concern more is, how does the grassroots community preserve this and help the indigenous community too? Like, when you think about big companies coming in, where would they start getting the medicine, the research, the funding goes towards going into these small communities that makes the plant, and how do you preserve them? How do you protect them? And then at the same time, make it accessible for everybody.
That's a good question. Ariel, do you have any insights into that as somebody who's sort of tapped into the indigenous culture of the medicines?
I think, just as it was talked about on the first panel, that big pharma, the investors, the tech bros and gals, I guess, and the people moving that way, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. We already know that. We're with Nissan's systems, so it's like focus on community, focus on being intentional, at least in our practices. Like, everybody here is getting the experience of understanding that is going to be the more important aspect than kind of moving towards the big pharma aspect. So I think just focusing on that, and again, lifting up voices. Like, you don't have to be indigenous to say, hey, actually, that is anti-indigenous, or that's not respecting communities. You don't have to come from the community. It actually is really helpful when there are other voices in the room who are saying, no, that's not appropriate.
So it's really up to all of us to ensure we maintain this sacredness. Yeah, thank you.
I think when I mentioned the case of peyote, that is very like a kind of big example of this. So peyote is used in the United States as native sacrament of this land. And when initiatives of decriminalization started to happen across the country, they were pushing for decriminalization of peyote. And some Native American groups, bona fide organized institutions that have a large track record on the field, got together and asked psychedelic movement not to put peyote into the decriminalization, because there was a sacrament and it was a special trust relationship from Native Americans with the government, and it meant a lot. And they were currently negotiating things like cultivation, transportation, and other things with the government, and they didn't want any interference. They wanted to be the leaders of this. And so many people in the psychedelic movement really, really couldn't understand that. And that was this paradox, because who owns nature? So this is to everybody, and we are all, one common humanity, and why can you own this? You're not the owner of this plant. Sure, it is of nature, and in a way we are all connected, but it's a plant from a cactus from a certain territory that has a certain history. That's how it came about. And to understand that maybe you don't have the right to something had been extremely hard for people in the psychedelic movement.
Yeah. Thank you. That's an important point to bring out. Would you like to go ahead?
Hi, I'm Matt Lethbridge Kosterbulis, I wanted to ask you a hypothetical question. We have in our Constitution guaranteed rights of free speech and religion and press and assembly. We don't have health freedom in the same way, and as a result, the government, both at the federal and state levels, feels that they can impose on us the choices that we make with our own bodies. In a hypothetical, suppose we had a constitutional amendment that said we have individual health freedom in the same way as those other freedoms. What difference would that make to you?
First of all, it's a sad commentary that I can't even fathom what you're talking about. But I think that, I personally feel like, I used to work a great deal with a ketamine clinic, and it was so hard for people to be able to get their insurance to cover that, and it was such a, mental health-wise, a life-saving medicine. And I think it would be a huge turnaround if people could access this for their mental health, for their, whatever ails them physically in a responsible way. And I think that's probably what we grapple with the most, is the responsible use of these medicines. And, and again, we don't like to hear the word regulation and, things like that, but we do need accountability in this space. And I think if we can build accountability, and we had the privilege of governing our own health for our own bodies, I think that would be a complete 180 for so many people, especially with their mental health. Do anybody want to add anything to that?
I think there's plenty of resources already in the Constitution for us to do a lot of things, so I wouldn't stress too much about this.
Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Oh, okay. Thank you. Would you like to go?
Hello. Just kind of relating to what was mentioned earlier, with the hopefulness of the expansion of research with, psilocybin mushrooms and all the other things, do you think that will open up more research opportunities for someone that wants to go into research and teaching for these very niche field for a lot of people?
Yes. Do it. Plenty of research opportunity. It's a very new territory, virgin. Everything has to be built. We need a lot of help. We need a task force. There's a space for everybody. We need new blood, a new generation. It's good when you go to a new field. If you do this much, you're already a big reference, because there's so many people, little people doing that. That's much of my own career. I started doing it, and then everybody wanted me, because there was just one or two of us. And so it's everything is there. It's like you're being co-author of history. You can witness your own contributions become history, and you see it in your own eyes. So there's plenty of opportunities. Really encourage everybody. And you know what? You guys are going to get it much easier than some of us, because it's already much better right now with stigma, money, legal opportunities. And the underground did a lot of big work in trying to advance all of this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have only time for one more question. If you'd like to go ahead, please.
So as we saw earlier with the raise of hands about ex-Mormons coming back to spirituality through psychedelics, I'm curious about, for example, maybe the opposite of that. For example, how many people here are practicing, would consider themselves practicing Mormons?
Woo! Wow.
So the reason I ask that is, how have you seen if psychedelics have strengthened faith traditions typically, or have they caused people to move away from their faith traditions and their cultures and whatever it may be, and replace it with something new? Any experience on that?
I would love to talk more about this with anyone. I tried to get my Mormon parents to drink kratom and kava a couple days ago, and they refused. That was my way of you could still do it and do this too, but they didn't want to. But I would love to have that conversation or chat with anyone who is in that space. I think that there's a lot of potential there, and it's a really interesting intersect. It's not my personal experience where I'm at, but I love what's ever helping anyone, and I think it's a really interesting conversation.
That's a great question.
Totally is adaptable to any kind of context. And here I'm really like gonna put my anthropologist hat. It's incredible. Like psychedelics, ayahuasca is the one that I know better for firsthand and research experience. There's use all across the board. There's Orthodox Jewish people in New York using ayahuasca all the time. There's Hare Krishna communities. There is new indigenous uses, indigenous people from the south of Brazil, for example, that didn't grow up with ayahuasca. They come and they drink ayahuasca and they start to remember stories, myths of origin, and traditions that were forgotten. And so it has helped them regain their own ethnicity. There's a big ethnic revival. Ayahuasca has helped a lot of alliances, pan-indigenous alliances. So people that had abandoned their practices start practicing again, and then they go back to their own traditions, and they don't go necessarily to other traditions. And so psychedelics, they can be amenable to, you can find what you need in there, and there's space for all kinds of communities. There's a huge plurality. There's also a blossoming of psychedelic religious movements. We held a conference in San Francisco 2 years ago, Religion and Psychedelics. We had a bunch of rabbis, we had a Presbyterian priest, we had Muslims. Chakrin was hosting a series called Islam and Psychedelics by our leader Hannah, who's a young Muslim woman, 21. That thing was viral. It was a magnet. All kinds of people joining. Find a lot of Muslims interested in psychedelics. So absolutely, I'm sure there's some very awesome local Mormon congregations using psychedelics.
Are there? I mean, I just would love to know if there are.
Yeah, where are they? Please set up the smoke signal. Let us know where they
Everybody
are.
meet in the corner there.
Yeah. We're going to start our own congregation. Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap up. I invite anybody who had additional questions to seek out our panelists separately. I'm sure they'd love to speak to you individually. And I just want to say thank you again to Sarah and the sponsors of this conference for having us up here. Thank you, lovely, lovely, strong, beautiful, intelligent women for representing your viewpoints. And the last thing I want to say is that, the changing landscape is in this office, is in this space right now. We are the changing landscape, and we can make whatever change we want. So thank everybody very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Shane.
If there's one thing they learned from the panelists, they needed a white guy in the picture.
Thank you.
All right, well, guys, Paul Stamets is coming up next. You guys may be a little excited about that. I know I am. And we'll have a short break, and bringing up Paul will be, I'd like to, one more time, Steve and Sarah Urquhart with the Divine Assembly that inspired all of this. Sarah will be introducing Paul. Sarah U Productions is officially what put all of this together. So I hope that you're back 5 minutes before the hour. Wait, did I screw up time? No, that's right. Yeah, at 7:55 she'll be up here. So I hope that you're in attendance. So that gives about 20 minutes. So again, just a quick combo break. Just get to a stall, milk that frog. 3 little burns in your arm. You're going to want to pick a pattern that looks cool when you show it to your friends. Later, you're going to want to take a little bit of that frog milk, put it in there. Now you're in for a real experience. You're going to want to be by the toilet. You're going to puke things, colors that you haven't seen before. Don't worry about the lack of evidence for the benefits here. You would not be doing this if it wasn't doing something to detox you. You're smarter than that, so it definitely works. Have that experience, 10, 15 minutes, grab some water, and we'll be back. All right, guys, thank you.